All right. Hey, everybody. Today, I want to share with you what I learned when I went to the bank for the first time since COVID began. And I don't see myself here, so I'm just going to assume I'm live. So, if you're like me, I've been very careful, and I actually haven't been to a lot of public places. But I did have to go to the bank, and it was a really interesting experience in this time of our pandemic. So masks are required here, and I had my mask on, and I actually had gloves on for anything I was going to touch. And I hadn't really wanted to go, but I had to deposit a couple of checks that I couldn't deposit online because my bank doesn't have that capability for this type of deposit. So it seemed to be very organized. We had a lineup for people who were there an hour before they opened, and we all sort of shuffled in. And they had lines on the floor so that we could see that we were 6 feet apart. And if you know how in the bank they have sort of it's almost like a maze where you have to walk through with sort of metal dividers that lead you around into the teller area. So there's a lineup where you kind of snake around and you're all kind of barred in. So we were standing in that line and everything was going well. And I went to the teller. And as it turned out, she was having trouble with my checks. They just weren't being accepted by the machine. And I said, well, can't you do it manually? And she said, no, they really want us to use the machine. So she was taking like 15 minutes, and I was getting a little uncomfortable standing in a fairly tight space. And what I realized as I was standing there and waiting for her to get this done was as I was at the teller, and there were like 3 or 4 other tellers to my right, people were leaving as they were finishing up their business with the other tellers, and they were walking like right behind me, off to my left where the exit door was. So I said, that's not 6 feet. And she said, no, but what can we do? That's where they have to leave, and there's nothing else that we can do. And I realized when I looked over to the right where the tellers were, there was a huge open space beyond the last teller where people could have circled around that little maze area, the line up area, could have just gone around the outside edge of that and still ended up at the exit door and could have maintained their distance from everyone, right? And it was so obvious to me. And I said, they could just go that way. And she was sort of blank, just a blank space. Well, this is the way they go up. This is how we do it. And it occurred to me that so often, and I think of my clients who are stuck with their diets, who who fall back into old patterns. And if you think about it, so often we can't see what's right in front of our face, right? So instead of looking left, all they had to do was look right, a tiny little adjustment, and they would have seen a completely different outcome where they could have taken a new vision of how the bank was set up in order to accommodate everybody and keep everybody at a safe distance. And I just thought, it's because our brains are just wired this way that we don't see those kinds of things. Your brain is wired to keep you the same. That is what your brain is most comfortable with. And that is what we are actually hardwired to do, because that's safety, that's consistency, that's how we have traditionally survived. And so it's actually difficult for us to even acknowledge those kinds of things because we don't recognize them as something, as another option. So what I want to offer to you, if you've been having difficulties, especially in this time, sticking with your eating habits that are healthy eating habits and the ones you want to stay with, but sometimes all it is just looking at something ever so slightly differently, looking left instead of, or looking right instead of looking left, or looking left instead of looking right, just taking a tiny shift in perspective, and that can make all the difference in the final outcome. So it isn't always a huge change where you have to learn how to eat 100% differently from the way you were eating before, or where you have to live a completely different life from the life you were living before. It can be just a very small adjustment that then gives you the ability to continue on in a different way of eating, in a different way of living. So I just thought that was really interesting that here it is literally right in front of their faces, and they weren't able to see it because we are so deeply ingrained in the way we see the world. And sometimes the options might actually be there in front of us, but we simply don't recognize them. So next time you're feeling stuck or you're feeling like it's just too difficult to make the changes that you need to make, that's something to think about because that really can make a difference for you. So I hope that was helpful. If it was, please do let me know. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think. Let me know what you are struggling with, what are the issues that you have around your healthy diet, and I would love to address those in a future Facebook Live as well. All right, everybody, take care, and I will see you next time. It doesn't want to end.